8.5 days of drowning pretty much in January of 2020, where I think before it was a thing, I think I had it.
Okay, maybe you did have it. That would be.
I mean, I literally was for 3 days. I had to sleep in the bathtub because I couldn't even get up to the toilet, and I literally was drowning. I was on my stomach to hang my lungs and try to get some. So I don't see that that's a thing. And I would love to be there, but I think
you need to be there, but
I respect to everybody else's health. And then I don't get into the vax, anti-vax stuff. It's just, I'm not going, to do it. And that's the priority, the decision that I made.
Okay.
Respect everyone.
All right.
Who does.
Well, if you come, you may have to think about wearing a mask when the older ladies are around, like Colleen and Leah, who's just had it. And so
we can talk.
Yeah, I mean, I think that there's a certain amount of immunity, herd immunity that applies. Now, I am not seeing the chat on YouTube, and I don't know why. Does anybody know why it's not coming up?
Yeah.
I mean, I have, oh my gosh. I
also feel like,
go ahead.
I said, I also feel like the continued new vaccine, et cetera, is kind of this, it feels like a codependent long goodbye. It's like, guys. So anyway, I'm no doctor though, so I'm not going to make any medical.
Well, I don't.
I'm a functional medicine nurse practitioner, and if either of you wants a functional medicine immunology reason why the virus needs to be eliminated with a vaccine, I can give it to you. Not a standard medicine, functional medicine. So there are very, very good reasons to be immunized, and I can give them to you.
Excellent. I also take Unca, which is a natural flu killer. It's an African herb, and it's an African root herb that's made into just a chewable tablet.
There's also something great called citicoline, which is a preventive. It doesn't prevent the virus, but it prevents it. It prevents the drowning. It prevents the
lung fluid.
Yeah. Yes, exactly. Because what COVID produces, the toxin that causes the drowning resembles a poisonous snake venom.
Right.
What the citicoline does is prevent that from taking effect on your body, but you still need to be immunized.
Acetylcholine's a neurotransmitter, isn't it?
It's not acetylcholine. It's citicoline. It's the name of the product. It's also called CDP choline if it's a different company.
Would alpha GPC work the same way?
It's not choline. Choline would actually make it worse. It's citicoline. So it's a very, very specific product, and it prevents the drowning. It doesn't prevent the virus, but it prevents the drowning.
Yeah, and I think what's interesting about the drowning, I had pneumonia when I was a kid, and in an oxygen tent for 10 days. I indelibly remember pneumonia, and this was not that. This had teeth. That the pneumonia was more endurance, but whatever this, the COVID thing is, like you said, with that working like the snake venom, that makes a lot of sense because it's taking.
I need to stop this. Let me just say that we are live on YouTube now. And from my perspective, I'm here because of the flu of 1918. My grandfather was engaged to a woman who, together with her 4 sisters, died on the same weekend from the Spanish flu. And as a result of that fact, I'm here because he married my grandmother instead. So I'm not anathema about pandemics. However, I I also respect the epidemiologists at CDC and Dr. Fauci, who found ways to control HIV. And so in any case, I think that the rule is if 70% of the herd is immunized, that's basically got it under control in a community. I'm just reminding everybody of the age of our participants. So I would really like to have you there, Jordan, but I can't force you to go. And I think if you're not going to get immunized, please bring a mask. I may be masking also because, and I haven't decided about that, but I am getting another shot in the middle of September. And I have had my flu shot, which I never miss. Okay, now we need to go on. Good morning, everyone.
We'll have these.
Okay, well, that's cool. That's very good, Jordan. And Patrick is
a double mask.
Yeah, it's a double mask with a filter pocket.
With a filter, and the disposable masks aren't good once they get wet. So there's a kind of mask called Living Guard. It's made by a company called Living Guard. They're made for people that work in hospitals, and they're very comfortable. And I had one on when I got COVID last year, and I actually saw patients before I knew I had it, and I did not infect anybody. So I think that the Living Guard masks are like, I'm a fan.
Yeah, these are polyester, double walled with the double walled because a filter pocket. But I had them produced from images on my tarot deck, so that it was. I hate to say this, but it was fashion mask, because the blue ones, one, that they don't do much, but they dry your throat out, which makes it easier to get anything because they take all the moisture out, and also you can't hear people. I mean, so there's a whole. If you put the mask on and it's not like the ones you're talking about, you kind of end up becoming a mute because people can't hear the treble to find out what you're actually articulating.
Yeah. Okay, let's move on with the and the prequel. Thank you for your kind gift this morning. I want to go back to the Red Book, which is our topic for today. The Red Book by C.G. Jung, Reader's Edition. And we are still in Nox Secunda. There's a couple of pages left which are interesting. And then Nox Tertia, which comes next, is really interesting because Dr. Jung talks about, Dr. Jung talks about how we're all mad, M-A-D, not mad angry, but mad crazy, and how we have to get that under control. So in any case, if you look at 345, Jordan, if you look at 345, did we read all the rest of Nox Secunda?
We did, because I remember talking about I accepted the chaos, and in the following night, my soul approached me, and then I said, I think I look at chaos as a human-made word, as an approximation of nature. Nature knows no chaos, disorder, or order. So the chaos, I accepted the nature, my own inner nature, and the following night, my soul approached me. So in that sense, I feel like Jung gold panned the psyche.
Okay, so we did read that part. Yeah. Okay, all right. I apologize. I had marked the wrong date, or I hadn't marked the date. So that's what we did last week. Okay, all right. So we are going to begin with Nox Tertia, and if you think you have missed the previous two pages, please do read them because they're interesting. But I'm going to go on with assuming that we're on Nox Tertia. The footnote reads that it's January 18th, 1914. So once again, we are back in the midst of Dr. Jung's visioning period. I'm emphasizing that it's still only a little over 3 weeks since Christmas 1913 when these visions began. And so he's been taking notes like a crazy man, and we're 2/3 of the way through the Red Book. So what I'm emphasizing is that this period of visioning that Dr. Jung went through is still less than a month at this point. He had the wisdom to note down all these visions that he had, and then he spent the rest of his life basically interpreting them, and that's what the collected works are. But I do owe something from last week, and that is that last week I promised that I would get Art Patterson's video link to everybody. Right. And this is a very, very powerful video. I just want to warn everybody to be aware that Art has cerebral palsy, and Art has been one of our most dedicated. He's online today. He's one of our most dedicated followers, and he's been here every week for at least 3 years. And he told me last week that he's in the midst of training for or preparing for another New Warrior training adventure in Arizona in May of next year. So Art is a very active person who is helping other men, especially other men who have disabilities. And so I hope that you'll take some time to go take a look at Art's video when you have a chance. Not interrupting your participation here, but I was really, really moved when I saw this video, Art, and I'm very pleased to have the opportunity to share it with others.
Thanks for that.
So Art, thank you very much for being here again, as you are practically every week that I've seen. So, I mean, this of all the people in the world that I know, Art is the sanest that I know. Okay. He's very clear about what he's doing, and so right. on. And so, and anyway, another person who was amazing like this was
your video froze.
Okay.
Your video froze there before you mentioned that second person's name.
Okay, so Lynn Keller is here, and I guess it's your married name, right, Lynn? But
yes,
it reminds me of Helen Keller, who was born with tremendous disabilities, but overcame them. She was blind and she could not hear, blind and deaf, I think, from birth. And yet she was able, with the help of her teacher, to communicate. And I forget, later, did she win the Nobel Prize? I'm not sure. But she became a very, very powerful educator.
Helen Keller win the Nobel Prize.
According to homework.study.com.
No,
No.
no Nobel Prize.
Okay, but she won a lot of other recognition. So, so anyway, thank you for your usual humility, Art. But you are number one in my book. I'll tell you what. Okay, so Nox Tertia, we're going to talk about that. It's January 18th, 1914. 3 weeks after Dr. Jung's visioning period had begun. And here's what the book says. My soul spoke to me in a whisper, urgently and alarmingly. Words, do not make too many words. Be silent and listen. Have you recognized your madness, and do you admit it? Have you noticed that all your foundations are completely mired in madness? Do you not want to recognize your madness and welcome it in a friendly manner? You want to accept everything, so accept madness too. Let the light of your madness shine, and it will suddenly dawn on you. Madness is not to be despised and not to be feared, but instead you should give it life. Your words sound hard, and the task you set me is difficult. Soul, if you want to find paths, you should also not spurn madness, since it makes up such a great part of your nature. I didn't know that. I didn't know that this is so. Soul, be glad that you can recognize it, for you will thus avoid becoming its victim. Madness is a special form of the spirit and clings to all teachings and philosophies, but even more to daily life, since life itself is full of craziness and at bottom utterly illogical. Man strives toward reason only so that he can make rules for himself. Life itself has no rules. This is its mystery and its unknown law. What you call knowledge is an attempt to impose something comprehensible on life. That all sounds very desolate, but nevertheless it prompts me to disagree. Soul, you have nothing to disagree with. You are in the madhouse. There stands the fat little professor. Had he spoken this way, and had I taken him for my soul? Professor, yes, my dear, you are confused. Your speech is completely incoherent. I too believe that I've completely lost myself. Am I really crazy? It's all terribly confusing. Professor, have patience. Everything will work out. Anyway, sleep well. Thank you, but I'm afraid. Everything inside me is in utter disarray. Matters are becoming serious and chaos is approaching. Is this the ultimate bottom? Is chaos also a foundation? If only there weren't such terrible waves. Everything breaks asunder like black billows. Yes, I see and understand. It is the ocean, the almighty nocturnal tide. A ship moves there, a large steamer. I'm just about to enter the smoking parlor. Many people, beautiful clothes. They all look at me astonished. Someone comes up to me and says, "What's the matter? You look like a ghost. What happened?" Nothing. That is, I believe that I have gone crazy. The floor sways. Everything moves. The sea is somewhat rough this evening, that's all. Have a hot toddy. You're seasick. You're right. I am seasick, but in a special way. I'm really in a madhouse. Okay, I'm going to stop at that point and give you all an opportunity to comment.
I like that he mixes the soul and the psychiatrist, who's basically, no matter what he says, you're in the madhouse, so you're wrong. And that power of suggestion psychiatry rather than actual healing, hygeia, well-being psychiatry, that he mixes the soul as this voice of external voice of reason, and with the psychiatrist, which I think is it's obviously very intentional, and it's also the way it happened for him. I mean, it's that just really stands out to me as a message from him.
I like how everything that Jung does is just sort of this mysticism, alchemy, and then it all falls under psychiatry. It's so amazing to me how he has this sort of like alchemy of the soul. And for some people, I'm pretty sure his literature is most likely banned in some Muslim nations because it would be considered some kind of sorcery or witchcraft. But he really he hits on the money when it comes to the alchemy of the soul, and trying to understand the psyche and inner self and personality all as one integrated unit.
Yeah.
Go ahead, Patrick. Did you want to say something?
Sure. I very much enjoy the fact that he emphasizes embracing your irrationality, your irrational side. But I'm a firm believer in the concept of individuation as a wholeness of yourself. That's the point, is becoming more whole, and striving for that balance point. To me, I always felt, ever since I was a kid, I had like an innate sense of balance being what you strive for in all things, because anytime you go extreme in one direction or the other, it tends to backfire severely, and then you get that pendulum shift back to the other end, and so on and so forth.
Righto.
That's a really good point too, because the ship, be the ship, stay the course. It moves back and forth, but it's always on the ocean, but it doesn't jump to the right, jump to the left, and split. It's still always that, literally the vessel of the ship.
Right.
And that vessel is a metaphor for us.
Yeah.
Right.
We are the ship, and we are.
In my life, that's especially pertinent because I'm an addict, and I'm actually in a recovery house right now. And I was homeless for a little bit, and that was not the first time. And it's a result of embracing extremes, pleasure seeking, and then trying to build a life and losing everything. And it makes you realize what's truly important. And at the end of the day, it begins and ends with the psyche, and that's why I really dove into depth psychology. So
it sounds like it's right up your alley, because and it sounds like you've started to appreciate what happens in 12-step programs and so on now.
Yeah, I see how there's a huge influence. But I see the influence in the NA meetings that I go to, where it's you could just tell there was some sort of interplay between depth psychology and recovery.
Yeah. I know a psychologist, I think, in Oakland, who had a tremendous period of madness for about 4 years, and
Wow.
now he works in a center for people who are suffering through that experience.
The wounded healer.
Huh?
The wounded healer, Screepius.
That neither one of them sounds like the one. There's one. It may be Berkeley. I'm not sure which, but anyway, he, I'm sure, is a tremendous healer, because Dr. Jung talks about the fact that only the wounded doctor can heal. And and lots of people, obviously we're losing 70 to 100,000 people a year to fentanyl and other drugs. And I'm now working in a school that's for basically kids whose behavior is out of control, and so they have to work through it. They're 6th to 9th graders, and so they're in their puberty years, and they just have to work through it. And I'm just so impressed by the other faculty in this school that they're so empathetic, and what they do is they give these kids a solid place to be and allow them to mature. It seems to me, and I've only been teaching there a week. We've only had students for a week, but the kids I see, wow, these are just young guys, mostly guys, who are just haven't learned how to live in society yet, and so they're passing through adolescence, and they're at the early stages of adolescence, so they basically just have to grow up. And I hope I'm offering a steady hand to them.
God bless you, because it does take a special type of patience and mentality to be able to work with kids like that. So my hat's off to you.
Yeah, I always called it the hyena phase, and I didn't play the lion. It's play the silence and allow them. I love that you're giving them a stable mooring, and in a way so that they have something to return to that they've never known.
So let's ask Lynn. Did you have a comment on this passage, Lynn?
Just listening right now. Thank you.
Okay, yeah, fine. All right, let me read on then.
I will add too, with Patrick, with your experience, I mean, you're right there on the front lines. So in a sense, you're in a similar place to Jung himself in those facilities with these huge intensities that have manifested in people. And you have a very clear view to form, the perspectives that are informed, not from an analysis perspective, from a this is the way it is perspective, which is often wonderfully irrational, because if you analyze it, it's going to be too intellectually clean. And I always like to say, well, that's nice, but that makes too much sense to be worth a damn. There's got to be some life in there, and that's messy. So I appreciate that you're doing what you're doing, because then you're turning to go, oh, I'm here, and I still have a perspective, except it's informed by these intensities. So good for you, because I just see an overlay between you and Jung.
I'm really impressed by you, Patrick, that you've pulled it together enough to be here with
thanks,
us,
guys.
going through this.
I love this stuff. I'm drawn to it. I have a passion for it, and I'm just curious. That's I love learning. So thanks, guys. But
yeah,
you're welcome.
There's no experience like there is no teacher like experience.
Yeah.
Somewhere around page 100 to 140.
Right.
Jung talks a lot about from my understanding, expectations. Last week I celebrated my 2-year anniversary at Alcoholics Anonymous, and not a lot of people showed up because there were 2 other anniversaries taking place, and some of the other people, they had like 40, 50 years, and so I wasn't heartbroken about it, and some of my peers, they apologized. I said, it's okay, just get me a cupcake or a Napoleon fruitcake next week. And towards the end, my other peer didn't know, and she was like co-hosting, and so when the whole meeting was over, she said, "Oh, I know how much it means to you. I'm sorry it didn't come out the way you wanted it to be. It's not everything you hoped for." And I said to her, I stopped having these expectations of how I want things to be. I just let them be, let nature take its course. Mm-hmm. Let the natural just be. If people want to show up, they're going to show up. And I said, you know what, this is Alcoholics Anonymous. You're showing up here for yourself. But, if you're showing up here for my anniversary, thank you so much. But, I hope I taught you something. But in Jung, in the Red Book, somewhere between those 40 pages, he talks about that. He says, don't expect things, because you have to go through the unexpected to shape yourself.
I appreciate you brought that up, because I use a concept with my clients of inspect your expectations, because expectations are basically the symbol of blind spots. And you need to see what really is. So you live with discretion and discernment through the navigation, not through control. And so I think the navigation of life is that way. The messy is expected, and you can forget trying to make it all nice kind of thing.
Yeah. Dionysus on YouTube, Dionysus says, "That's awesome, Mel and Patrick. Never could get behind the programs." Well, say it again, Patrick.
I said I had a tough time with it myself, because I don't like dogmatic systems. But congratulations, Mel. And the celebration wasn't the point. The fact that you had that to celebrate for was. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you.
No, it's not an interruption. Go ahead.
That was it. I just wanted to say congratulations to Mel.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Absolutely. You're both getting it together, and what's interesting to me is the broad range of people that have interest in this work, and that I have attracted folks that in some way have felt broken in their lives. And I certainly have gone through those phases, because I had a visioning period like this, very similar, but it lasted 8 months, not 4 weeks. and I wrote a novel because I thought I was just writing a novel. I didn't realize what was going on at the time. And I put it away for 16 years, because that happened in 1993. And I had no clue what was going on, but I said, okay, I'm just going to roll with this. And I wrote it all down, and it became a novel that a lot of people loved. And, it wouldn't be something that I necessarily would have picked up had I known what was going to be in it, but it had a lot of praise back in the day.
I think that's a really good point there, because it reminds me of learning to drive, except learning to drive, not just a standard transmission, learning to drive 3 on a tree in a farm truck, and specifically taking you out to their friend's farm to learn on 3 on the tree. And after about a week and a half, you are pretty sure that the lesson here is your dad and your grandfather seeing how long will you keep trying until you cut bait, because this is truly impossible. And it's impossible. This truck, no one drives this truck. This truck was only made to show people that it's impossible to drive it. And then you get it to move 6 inches, and the hope happens. And so I think that's kind of life, of having to stay the course to then learn some very clunky and seamless motions for big gear shifts to get the thing moving. And then once you do, you understand, like Patrick was saying, not too far to one side, not too far to the other. And 3 on the tree, I mean, only 3 gears is unforgiving because you have so much of a span for the speeds. If you go into the wrong gear, I mean, the whole thing just kind of screeches to a halt. So that's kind of the tree on a tree learning is kind of, to me, a metaphor for learning to live. And then after a while, you're pretty much a smooth race car driver with that truck because this is the way it just happens.
Yeah, and,
I had the same experience.
what happened to me, Patrick, is that I kept going, and right after that, I had an entrepreneurial opportunity. That, in fact, the entrepreneurial opportunity was going on while this was happening. And the result was ultimately that the company that I founded in 1993, later we changed its name, but it became public in 2005. and basically it was, I had all this education, and I came to Washington at age 39 thinking that I could walk on water. And I spent 2 years. I had been walking on water for 5 years, but then I fell off the bus, and not because of alcohol or drugs or anything. I just, nobody saves a job for you when you come back from Japan. So I was 39 years old, and for 2 years I tried to find a job in Washington and just could not.
Hey,
do
Skip,
it.
I think your microphone is rubbing against your collar. I'm getting a lot of feedback. I'm not sure what's happening, but is anybody else hearing that?
I'm sorry, because the air conditioner's on in the background. I didn't realize I wasn't muted.
Oh, okay.
Okay. All right. So
you said something, Patrick, though, before about the three on the tree. I think that you were chiming in with an example, I think.
Yeah, you just reminded me, Jordan, of when I learned how to drive a dump truck with barely any experience of the manual. It was 8 high, 8 low, and it was unforgiving is the best word I could ever came up with to describe it.
Yeah, that's a perfect word.
It's
all right.
That's like college too. It's just a commitment. It's all about commitment and being able to see through. Sit down and grind through it, even if you don't want to.
Yeah, right. Or as Churchill said, when you're going through hell, keep going. Anyway.
There's one right here on page 341 in the Red Book. Joy should neither be made nor sought. It should come if it must come. Right?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Well, with Churchill and expectations, also there's a story of him and his wife crossing a big plaza, and she sees this street sweeper, and she goes, "Pardon, Winston, I'll be back." And she walks over, and she's talking to the street sweeper. 25 minutes, 30 minutes. He's starting to get a little curious, who is this man across the plaza that my wife's, so engaged with? And she comes back, and he said, "Well, who was that?" She said, "Well, the street sweeper." "Yes, but you obviously know this person, and you were over there a while. Who is he?" She goes, "Oh, Winston, he and I were madly in love several years before you and I met, and we were to be married. But, sometimes life finds a way and it doesn't work out." And he goes, "Oh, honey, to think you could have been married to the street sweeper instead of the prime minister." And with all 4 fingers, she pokes him in the ribs and says, "Winston, if I would have married him, he would have been prime minister." So she busted that expectation bubble. Right. It's self.
Anyway, okay. So Jung is on this voyage. He's chatting with some of the other passengers on this ship, and someone says to him, "Well, now you're joking again. Life is returning." Do you call that wit? Just now the professor pronounced me truly and utterly mad. The fat little professor is actually sitting at a green-covered table playing cards. He turns toward me when he hears me speak and laughs. Well, where did you get to? Come here. Would you like a drink too? I'm quite a character. You're quite a character. I must say, you've put all the ladies in quite a flurry this evening. Aye, Professor, for me, this is no longer a joke. Just now I was your patient. The parlor erupts in unbridled laughter. Professor, I hope that I haven't upset you too much. Aye, well, to be committed is no small matter. The first, the person to whom I had been speaking before suddenly comes up to me and looks me in the face. He is a man with a black beard, a tousled head of hair, and dark, shining eyes. He speaks to me vehemently. Something worse happened to me. It's 5 years now that I've been here. I realize that it is my neighbor who has apparently awakened from his apathy and is now sitting on my bed. He goes on speaking fiercely and urgently. But I am Nietzsche, only rebaptized. I am also Christ, the Savior, and appointed to save the world, but they won't let me. Aye, who let you? Who won't let you? The fool. The devil. We are in hell, but of course you haven't noticed it yet. I didn't realize until the second year of my time here that the director is the devil. Aye, you mean the professor? That sounds incredible. The fool. You're an ignoramus. I was supposed to marry the mother of God long ago, but the professor, that devil, has her in his power. Every evening when the sun goes down, he gets her with child. In the morning before sunrise, she gives birth to it. Then all the devils come together and kill the child in a gruesome, and there's a reference to image 109, in a gruesome manner. I distinctly hear their cries. Aye, but what you have told me is pure mythology. The fool. You're crazy and understand nothing of it. You belong in the madhouse. My God, why does my family always shut me in with crazy people? I'm supposed to save the world. I'm the savior. He lies down again and sinks back into his lassitude. I clutch the sides of my bed to protect myself against the terrible waves. I stare at the wall so that I can see at least latch unto something with my eyes. The horizontal line runs along the wall, which is painted a darker color beneath. A radiator stands in front of it. It is a railing, and I can see the sea beyond it. The line is the horizon, and there the sun now rises in red glory, solitary and magnificent. In it is a cross from which a serpent hangs, or is it a bull slit open, as at the slaughterhouse, or is it an ass? I suppose it is really a ram with a crown of thorns, or is it the crucified one himself? The sun of martyrdom has arisen and is pouring bloody rays over the sea. The spectacle lasts a long time. The sun rises higher. Its rays grow brighter and hotter, and the sun burns down white on a blue sea. The swell has subsided. A charitable and quiet summer dawn lies on the shimmering sea. The salty smell of water rises up. A faint, wide surf breaks on the sand with dull thunder and returns incessantly 12 times the stroke of the world clock. The 12th hour is complete, and now silence enters. No noise, no breeze, Everything is rigid and deathly still. I wait, secretly anxious. I see a tree arise from the sea. Its crown reaches to heaven, and its roots reach down into hell. I am completely alone and disheartened and gaze from afar. It is as if all life had flown from me and completely passed into the incomprehensible and fearful. I am utterly weak and incapable. Salvation, I whisper. A strange voice speaks. There is no salvation here. You must remain calm, or you will disturb the others. It is night, and the other people want to sleep. I see. It's the attendant. The room is dimly lit by a weak lamp, and sadness weighs on the room. I couldn't find the way. He says, you don't need to find a way now. He speaks the truth. The way, or whatever it might be, on which people go is our way, the right way. There are no paved ways into the future. We say that it is this way, and it is. We build roads by going on. Our life is the truth that we seek. Only my life is the truth above all. We create the truth by living it. Okay, now there's a couple of footnotes here. Let's see if I can read them. In relations between I and the unconscious, 1928, Jung refers to a case of a man with paranoid dementia he encountered during his time at the Bergholzli, who was in telephonic communications with the Mother of God. And then going on, the image legend, this man of matter rises up too far in the world of the spirit. There the spirit bores through his heart with the golden ray. He falls with joy and disintegrates. The serpent, who is the evil one, could not remain in the world of the spirit. And then another one, Jung's marginal note in the calligraphic volume, dated March 22nd, 1919. This seems to refer to when this passage was transcribed into the calligraphic volume. And let's see, what else do we have here? In Religion and Psychology, Jung commented on the symbolism of the world clock. And one other, in Dante's Commedia, the following lines were inscribed over the gates of hell. Abandon every hope, you who enter. See the Divine Comedy by Dante. Robert Durling wrote a book about the Divine Comedy. Okay. All right. So
I think that last line is the most important there. Our life is the truth that we seek. Only my life is the truth above all. We create the truth by living it. So that live your path into being rather than trying to plan it.
Yeah. And it reminds me of a quote that came up. One of the teachers I'm working with has been having children write a quote that goes on the wall. And so I decided to participate with her on doing that. And so the quote I wrote is, beauty is truth, truth, beauty, and truth, beauty. And any idea where that comes from, Jordan? Stump the stars.
Is that Joyce? No, it's not. I don't. It's not coming to me.
Okay, it's from Ode to a Grecian Urn by John Keats. And Richard says, it amazes me that even Jung recognized the need for salvation, redemption, but yet there are wise men who don't. Yeah, there are plenty of wise men who don't. We're especially seeing it lately.
Well, I love the need for salvation, but also there is no salvation here. And I remember writing an article years ago called Strip Yourself of Salvation, because that's a huge expectation that somehow the pot at the end of the rainbow, gold, the pot at the end of the rainbow is you, home, now. And I think that's not salvation, it's living again.
Yeah, yep. And Anthony mentions, I'm aware of a 12-step Bhakti-inspired program in which the higher power is Krishna .podcast and entitled Wisdom of the Sages on YouTube. Okay, so there's a 12-step program that's the inspiration for which is Indian tradition. Did you want to make a comment here, Amela? So I rarely mark things in red, but I did on this page mark a number of things in red. And I think it's worth commenting. The ones I have marked in red, I am utterly weak and incapable. Salvation, I whisper, a strange voice speaks. There is no salvation heard. So in other words, you cannot join a herd and find salvation.
I have a story, but it's not my story. So
well go ahead.
I hope the person doesn't get upset with me because they're still alive and kicking. There's this woman whose parents, they were victims of a homicide. So the young woman, she was in foster care for some time. And by the time she was going through puberty, she thought, this is it. I'm not a small, cute little kid anymore. No one's going to adopt me. And lo and behold, she got adopted. And the family, they really, really loved her. And it was so funny because she said that when she looked at the photo of her biological parents, and then she looked at her actual parents, and there was this weird resemblance of the two people. Like they had these, and I'm not sure. I know that in Germany, this is considered like doppelgangers, but for some Hindu cultures, it's considered the other you in this parallel universe. So when she was telling me this story, and when I was also looking at the picture, I was shocked. I mean, I was at a loss of words, but I guess sometimes when some things are meant to be, no matter how tragic it is, when something is meant to be, it's just going to be. Mm-hmm. I mean, it's pretty sad, but like going back to the joy thing, on page 347 in the red book, I know it's a little backwards, but we call this nothingness or fullness of the pleroma, nowhere divided since it is nothingness. So it's just, life is weird, man. It's just weird.
Well, as someone said recently, and I don't know where I heard it, but there actually is no chaos. There's no such thing as chaos. That that natural events occur. Maybe we interfere with them, but they don't stop happening. They just if we interfere with them and change something that changes the course of history, that's just some of the things that molecules do, given
That
enough
sounds like,
time.
yeah, that sounds like my big soapbox, where chaos is just a human-made intellectual concept that loosely approximates an average of nature, because nature knows no order, no disorder, no intent, no dreams. And I think the closest verb I see with nature is command. It is what it is. So nature is a wonderful metaphor for navigating self.
Well, and the only order is us. Okay, in other words, we put order in nature, and
well, I don't think we put it in nature. I think we try
but
to
it's temporary. It's temporary. That's the point. The rational world, the world of logos is all temporary, because.
Well, I think attributing order to nature is standing on the side of the pool looking at the top of the water. It's topical, superficial, and unexperiential. And I think then we should forget the order, dive in the pool and swim.
We try to anthropomorphize everything too.
I'm sorry, Patrick, go ahead.
I try to anthropomorphize everything and ascribe human qualities to, nature. And maybe there is a higher order, like a meta order that is outside of our ability to perceive it, because it does seem like nature follows certain mathematical laws. But again, those mathematical laws are man-made. So it's interesting.
Well, and I don't
think humans care about nature, because if we did care about nature, we wouldn't be dumping toxic waste into the waters. We would find better alternatives. So when it comes to society and governments, there's no such a thing as nature. Just keep going.
Well, Mela, that's a good point, because what's interesting is we are nature. And so with society not caring about nature, it really says clearly, oh, people don't care about themselves.
Patrick, could you mute, please?
Sorry.
And, people don't care about themselves. And to me, one of the most often ignored qualities of leadership is self-care. Leaders do not operate on an empty tank. You don't drive past half full, like your mom told you when you first started driving. Take any road trip adventure you want, but never go below half a tank. You can lose cell phone service, but don't lose your, lose your momentum. So I think that people, not liking nature, they're not connected to their own nature. So, basically there's like Patrick was saying, that we try to anthropomorphize everything. Well, then we pour all the trash in the oceans and try to hide it, sight unseen, out of sight, out of mind. But the reality is we're still pouring it into our larger system. So it's just as unhealthy. So, dealing with the trash, you've got to exhaust it differently.
No, well, not everybody, just so many people think that way. But
not a generalization.
It's very unfortunate, because, sometimes the decisions that we make are permanent and people don't realize that there are future generations. But what can you do? And also there are people who just straight up don't like nature and really just don't like humanity and are very selfish and self-centered and think the whole world revolves around them. So there's
that kind of self-center usually does not have a center. It ends up becoming egomaniacal instead of self-centered. Being yourself has a center.
Yeah. Well,
the individual and their thinking and their doing is the only way that is logical for that person, if that makes sense. When I say self, like for example, if I go, I don't really want to lecture, but when I say self, I mean the person is only thinking for themselves without regard to anyone else, is what I mean when I say self-centered.
Well, yeah, Jung says that only my life is the truth above all. That's excellent. You have a deep knowing of self, and then we create the truth by living it. Well, we live in community, we live in nature. So then you're sure of yourself, you have solid footing, or flight, or how swimming, however you work. But then you engage in community. And what happens is then you don't battle other people's self. Jung said at one point, the truest synchronicity is two people encountering each other for the first time, and their gods remain anonymous. So what and what happens is you're then curious with wonderment and interested in the other person. It's kind of like a 4-year-old. Oh, look, a person, my favorite. So there's that kind of thing. So I think that really resonant that you said that, because it's important to have your truth as the only way, except the only way for you. And then we have all these paths that are weaving in the fabric, but you're not slapping down other people's truth.
Whatever that may be, even if they do deny science.
I have a good example of
and
this
consequences.
A man who I worked with for a period of time was the national collegiate champion in speed chess. And he did have an ego on him. And but he could play chess like nobody's business. And the problem with that is that his perspective was based on chess pieces that can only do specific things.
Right.
And what I observed is that human beings tend to wiggle just a little bit more than chess pieces. It's a simple way of thinking about it. And so they react to what you're doing. And so that man, who at one point I used to call Bill Gates East, who was at that point worth about $400 million, according to his accounting, ended up as a fugitive from justice and in exile. He left the United States, and as far as I know, he never came back. And we see it again in our former president, who is very self-centered. You rarely hear him talking about anything that is different from what his needs are. But he's seeing that the rest of us wiggle just a little bit more than his dream of what we might do.
Well, and the chessboard's a really good one, because that's just like chaos. It's like in another approximation of nature, where operate not as the pieces. The pieces are all components of the psyche. You are, working the whole chessboard, both sides.
Yeah.
And at the same time, that's also just an average of the actual, because then it's more than that. There's the spaces between, and what's around the chessboard. So
okay, so my voice is giving out, Jordan, so I wonder if you could read the next section, which starts I did want to do one more thing, which is to repeat the last paragraph of the previous section, because it's so important. He speaks the truth. The way, or whatever it might be, on which people go is our way, the right way. There are no paved ways into the future. There are no paved ways into the future. We say that it is this way, and it is. We build roads by going on. Our life is the truth that we seek. Only my life is the truth above all. We create the truth by living it. Okay, so we create the truth by living it. It's an important concept. So if you would read to the break that's on page 355, I will be back shortly, and then we'll continue the discussion. That'll take you a ways, but
sounds good.
Okay.
I would love to read for you guys, but I'm on the move and I don't actually have a copy of the red book.
Okay, well, Jordan is gonna read it for you, right, Jordan?
Yes.
Okay.
And also, Skip has a Dropbox where you can get a PDF version if you like.
I have access to the Dropbox. It's like the treasure trove of information.
It sure is. It sure is.
Thank God for it.
Nice. All right. I'll read part
Where
two
can
here.
I find that box?
When Skip gets back, we'll get a link for you to his Dropbox.
I'm going to give you that right now. You caught
Okay.
me. Just a minute. I do have it right handy, I think.
And Patrick put it well. It's a treasure trove. It's like, it's not just Red Book. It's pretty much everything.
All right. So you go into this Dropbox and go into collected works. And I will put the link on both the Zoom and on the chat on YouTube. Okay, so that's the Dropbox. And there's another Dropbox, which is the advanced reading group. And I will share that as well. But in both of them is something called collected works, is a folder in each one of them. And if you go into there, you're going to find the treasure of the Sierra Madre and more.
Right.
Okay, I'll be.
Okay. So part two here. This is the night in which all the dams broke, where what was previously solid moved, where the stones turned into serpents and everything living froze. Is this a web of words? If it is a hellish web for those caught in it. There are hellish webs of words, only words. But what are words? Be tentative with words. Value them well. Take safe words, words without catches. Do not spin them with another so that no webs arise, for you are the first who is ensnared in them. For words have meanings. With words you pull up the underworld. Word, the paltriest and mightiest. In words, the emptiness and fullness flow together. Hence, the word is an image of God. The word is the greatest and the smallest that man created, just as what is created through man is the greatest and the smallest. So if I fall prey to the web of words, I fall prey to the greatest and the smallest. I am at the mercy of the sea, of the inchoate waves that are forever changing place. Their essence is movement, and movement is their order. He who strives against waves is exposed to the arbitrary. The work of men is steady, but it swims upon chaos. The striving of men seems like lunacy to him who comes from the sea. But men consider him mad. He who comes from the sea is sick. He can hardly bear the gaze of men, for to him they all seem to be drunken foolish from sleep-inducing poisons. They want to come to your rescue. And as for accepting help, for sure you would like less of that, rather than swindling your way into their company and being completely like one who has never seen the chaos, but only talks about it. But for him who has seen the chaos, there is no more hiding, because he knows that the bottom sways and knows that what the swaying means. He has seen the order and the disorder of the endless. He knows the unlawful laws. He knows the sea and can never forget it. The chaos is terrible, days full of lead, nights full of horror. But just as Christ knew that he was the way, the truth, and the life, in that the new torment and the renewed salvation came into the world through him. I know that chaos must come over men, and that the hands of those who unknowingly and unsuspectingly break through the thin walls that separate us from the sea are busy. For this is our way, our truth, and our life. Just as the disciples of Christ recognized that God had become flesh and lived among them as man, we now recognize that the anointed of this time is a God who does not appear in the flesh. He is no man, and yet is the Son of man, but in spirit and not in flesh. Hence he can be born only through the spirit of men, as the conceiving womb of God. What is done to this God, you do to the lowest in yourself, under the law of love, according to which nothing is cast out. For how else should your lowest be saved from depravity? Who should accept the lowest in you, if not you? Or who should accept the lowest in you, if you do not? But he who does it not from love, but from pride, selfishness, and greed is damned. None of the damnation is cast out either. If you accept the lowest in you, suffering is unavoidable, since you do the base thing and build up what lay in ruin. There are many graves and corpses in us, an evil stench of decomposition, just as Christ, through the torment of sanctification, subjugated the flesh, so the God of this time, through the torment of sanctification, will subjugate the spirit. Just as Christ tormented the flesh through the spirit, the God of this time will torment the spirit through the flesh. For our spirit has become an impertinent whore, a slave to words created by men, and no longer the divine word itself. The lowest in you is the source of mercy. We take this sickness upon ourselves, the inability to find peace, the baseness, and the contemptibility, so that the God can be healed and radiantly ascend, purged of the decomposition of death and the mud of the underworld. The despicable prisoner will ascend to his salvation, shining and wholly healed. Is there a suffering that would be too great to want to undergo for our God? You only see the one and do not notice the other. But when there is one, so there is also another, and that is the lowest in you. But the lowest in you is also the eye of the devil that stares at you and looks at you coldly and sucks your light down into the dark abyss. Bless the hand that keeps you up there, the smallest humanity, the lowest living thing. Quite a few would prefer death, since Christ imposed bloody sacrifice on humanity. The renewed God will also not spare bloodshed.
Righto. And very good, Jordan. Thank you so much.
Sure.
We have some long footnotes in the segment that Jordan just read. But before we get to those, I want to just observe that, even though we claim we have given up human sacrifice, we haven't. And so,
Wars.
Pardon? Yeah.
Wars.
Yeah. Wars are a classic example, and we have these marble walls and other accoutrements down on the Washington Mall near the Lincoln Memorial that are testaments to the sacrifice. And
Well, and I think too with that, I think this is me. I don't think it's an old quote. I think it's just, there's a concept of, the old send the young to die because it's much more easy to do so than to be terrified and have to care for them. And I think there's a piece there where care for humanity, care for the young, care for the old. But warring is, to me, a very amateur, crafty way.
Jordan, you froze when you said the old send the young to die because it's much more easy, and then we lost you.
The old send the young to die. Yeah, the old send the young to die because it's much more easy than being terrified enough to have to care for them and not know what they're doing, yet the old then caring for the young caring for the old. It feels like wars are a petty amateur way to avoid actually living, because like Jung said, some people would much rather death. And I think that, it can be ultimately difficult, but there's a poetry to getting your rhythm, and it's like with the old quote, calm seas and never a good sailor made. Coming back and seeing all these people yearning and complaining. You've been out on the ocean, the old man in the sea. He caught the biggest fish and he, loses it as well. There's a metaphor of yanking yourself from the deep, and that's trouble, but you find treasure in the trouble. So to me, dignity and difference would eliminate wars in a way.
Sure. So Richard says unlawful laws, or is that all God allows us to see? Is this all a test? Well, yes, it is a test, and it's all graded. My students keep asking, is this graded? And I say, everything is graded in life.
Well, and I stopped grading.
You cannot escape it.
People may grade, but I don't grade, I live. And it reminds me that if people need laws to not do bad things, then they're not good people. They're bad people on a leash. So, it's finding your own, it's finding your own intensity, but not living on someone else's leash.
I've seen children on leashes, so now I'm questioning some parents. But
why that? And they have the stringy ones, and I saw a kid running out into the street. The mom was on the phone, and he's on the leash, but he's 20 feet away, and here come the cars. She was able to put the leash and then forget, which is
horrible. But Skip, what do you mean when you say you are grading life? Like, what do you mean? Like when you go to a pizza shop and the pizza's not that good?
Sure. Sure. But I mean, what you're doing right now, Mila, I grade you in my own psyche constantly. Right. It's not an ABC. It's it's an evaluation of this woman or this image of a woman who is before me. And I evaluate you in 1,000 different ways constantly, and the same with Patrick and the same with Jordan. And Jordan and I had our wars with one another long ago, and
like past lives, or just
disagreeing? In this life,
very much.
Oh, okay.
In this life, and then we decided to bury the hatchet and work together, which we have been doing for quite a while now, so that nobody would know that we would pass through that period in our relationship, but nonetheless we have. And
in the grading discretion, there's the discretion of how to interact. We learned each other's edges. It was truth and life and problems. And, it's the thing is too, what really brought it to bear was honesty, regardless of how messy. It wasn't cruel, but it was intense, but it was, this is what is occurring. And we both owned up into it.
It seems like you're both very firm on what your beliefs are, but it's like we spoke before, everyone has their own truths of their life, their meanings. And I have an issue as well. This is the thing with like people as individuals. I was in my mother's neighborhood, and there was this man. I was waiting for a friend of mine, and there was this man. Apparently we have a mutual friend. So this man is, we have a mutual friend, this stranger and I. So I'm waiting for my friend and his girlfriend, and who's my best friend, and I'm waiting for them to come, and he's apparently waiting for them too, and he has his bicycle and everything, and he said, "Yo, white girl, excuse me," and I was like, what happened? He's like, you're about to knock over my bicycle. And I said, oh, okay, I'm sorry. But then, he started like fidgeting, and it's this sort of primitive thing that we have going on, like very Darwinist thing that we do as human beings, because at the end of the day, we're still animals now. We're still biological. Even though we're civilized, we're not nomads anymore. We're not lay people anymore. Now we have structures and systems and all this stuff, but still, like, we're very territorial. And he made it clear to me that this was his neighborhood, so this was his territory. And that part right there is where he leaves his bicycle. And, so there's this thing. I feel like it's probably regardless of gender, because now we're sort of realizing the 72 varieties of gender identity. But, I don't think it's a gender thing. I think that it's just, how our comfort, what we are comfortable with. But there's this psychiatrist who probably didn't know Jung personally, but maybe knew Jung somehow, because he does a little psychoanalysis himself, Abraham Lowe. And he talks a lot about comfort is a want and not a need. So I try to remind myself of that sometimes.
Well, yeah, and I appreciate your comment. Go on. Oh, go ahead, Patrick.
No, I just she reminded me of a channel called Young to Live By, and they're like very much about integrating biology and psychology, like, the fact that we still have those instinctual drives within us.
Yes.
And they influence our thoughts and behavior, and like sometimes they compete, they're at odds with one another, and it gets interesting.
It does. And I think, Camilla, back to your comment too about Skip and I, what's interesting to me is that now, you wouldn't even know, because instead of motion limiting scars, we made golden connections by let's engage what's happening. And what happened is now, I think Skip and I appreciate how much we're an example, a living one, of dignity and difference. We both inhabit different generations. We were brought up with different beliefs. We've dispensed with a lot of the same beliefs, come to a lot of the same knowings, and there's this difference. But we're both, I think, not so much confident. I think it's unthreatened to listen, because we inherently express different perspectives, and that enlivens. I personally, I feel, I can't speak for Skip, but I feel like we're each gas in the other's tank, because his other perspective and his perspective coming from his life informs mine in a very living way. And I think that, I really appreciate that. I laugh. I talk about dignity and difference all the time, except the so big and so there you can't see it is Skip and I here every Sunday morning. There it is.
You guys are why I started participating in the reading group, because you have a great chemistry together, and that very well may be because you're so different, but the interplay between opposing viewpoints is great. You guys have an awesome chemistry, and you've had some great discussions, and that is definitely what made me want to participate instead of just be a passive observer.
Thank you, Patrick. I appreciate you're here.
I appreciate that very much. And we do have, I do recognize this at every chance I get. It's one of the reasons that I'm expecting Mr. Hoggard to make his way to California in October, because I want all of our friends, and we have many, fortunately, who know that Jordan and I have this relationship that was different, and yet and they have to see it in real life in action.
Mm-hmm.
And And we can't do that unless we're physically with that group. And I think it's very special. And
yeah, and I personally feel it's what I experience here is it's not about right or wrong. We graduated from that class. It's about the dignity and difference of how we can, in a two-person community way, inform each other without trying to inform. We have the banter and the interplay, but I feel there's a deep listening from over here where it's not just not interrupting. It's the other person speaking, you whole body listen. And I think what happens then is just by doing that, people nourish each other. And I think what I like is that we're both so interested in, we're both Jung geeks, so, we're both so similarly interested that we can bring something different to the table.
right. And
I should invite my boyfriend here. He's very stoic. I wonder how he would react.
who's that?
My boyfriend, he's very stoic. I wonder what he would have to say.
Good question. So we have a comment from Richard, which I cannot pass up because it expresses a mistake. And that is, Richard says, what makes one pick Buddha, the animus, as opposed to Jesus, divine? Okay, well, that's Richard, that's a fundamental misunderstanding of Buddhism and the life of Amida Buddha. The Jung commented that Buddhism is the closest to his psychology.
Mm-hmm.
And the difference between Buddhism and Christianity is that Christianity has a need to identify a divine person, and Buddha, what the Buddha did was not animus, it was enlightenment. Okay, he suffered through many trials of his own. He went to every extreme. In a moment, I'm going to look for my photograph of the fasting Buddha, which is in the museum in Lahore, Pakistan, and it's carved in jade, and it was carved in the 2nd century. So how that image, that piece of art that represents the fasting Buddha, survived to the present day is unknown. But when Richard, when you say the animus, that would suggest a duality, that Buddha was on an opposite side from Christ, but Buddha was simply a man who was enlightened, who observed, who realized that the dualities are out there, and then was able to teach from them. And so he went through all these crises, and there's no claim from the Buddha that he is God or any other such thing. In fact, in Buddhism, there is no God, no saints, no sinners, no right, no wrong, no gospels per se, only teachings, but those teachings are not sacrosanct. They're only teachings of the Buddha, and the Buddha gave 84,000 teachings, and those teachings are very much as I do here with Jordan every week. We help people see things that they didn't see before, and so then they appreciate being here with us, and that's what the Buddha did. And
I think that's important, the distinction you made too. I mean, catechism and gospels and rules. Okay, there's Christianity, but Buddhism, one rule with one appendix. The first rule I see, to live, and then the appendix is to live also with death. And there's the presence, and that's it. And instead of good and bad, it is what is. So don't waste trouble, get muddy, get dirty, find the treasure in the trouble. And if there's no treasure in the trouble, then the salvation was that there was nothing to carry home. So it's not so much a positive attitude, it's working with, living with what is. And that's beautifully simple and beautifully difficult.
Yeah. So the Buddha is reputed to have made 84,000 teachings, of which my wife used to work for an organization called 84,000. That's in the process of translating the teachings of the Buddha from Sanskrit into the world's languages, of which I think they're working with 16 languages, but only about 5% of the teachings of the Buddha have actually been translated even at this point. And they were recorded, and there are devoted monks all over the world that are in the process of translating them and so on. But in no way did the Buddha consider himself divine. And he's very much like Krishnamurti. Okay, let me give you an example of Krishnamurti, who lived at the beginning of the last century up until the 50s or 60s. But Krishnamurti was identified, maybe he lived almost to the year 2000. I'm not sure when he died, but anyway, he was identified on a beach in Madras, India, now Chennai, because he had a tremendous aura around his head. And a woman named Annie Besant took him into the Theosophist Society and said that this young boy, aged 10, and his brother, age 8 at the time, were the new messiahs. And she saw to it that he got educated at Cambridge, and he was very erudite. He was a Hindu all of his life. But in any case, he was under the thumb of Annie Besant for all these years. And when he was 33, they had a convention of the Theosophist Society in Holland, and people from all over the world were coming to be a part of this. And they were going to, I might have her name wrong. I think it's Annie Besant, but I might have her name wrong. There were a couple of women involved in this at that period of time, but it was Krishnamurti's 33rd birthday. And Annie Besant was going to proclaim him as the new Messiah at that time. And that was going to be the big deal of this big meeting, which was sort of a tent revival type of thing in Holland. And it was in the early 30s that this happened. And so she made this big announcement, and then Krishnamurti got up to speak, and he said, "I'm not a Messiah. I'm nobody's Messiah. I don't want followers. This is all ridiculous. I'm not the Messiah, and I never will be." And as a result of that disclaimer, he had followers for the rest of his life and had no choice but to give teachings all of his life, which is what the Buddha did.
Well, and then that's a great example, because then Krishnamurti becomes an example of living your own life to teach other people by example to live their own life.
Right. And so, I mean, he was a beautiful man. You can find a lot of his teachings on YouTube. Most of them are black and white video.
Is he the one that wrote Think on These Things, Skip?
Possibly.
Okay.
I got most into his work by reading a book called Krishnamurti at 100. There was a book that just reflected back on his life 100 years after his birth. And he was very significant. He went to Ojai, California, ultimately, and that ultimately became his base of operations, because he got into the U.S. In the late 30s to protect him from the Nazis and so on. And he basically operated out of Ojai for the rest of his life. And that's Ojai, I believe, is the correct spelling of Ojai, California. But there is a Krishnamurti Center there and at several other places around the world. And you can see him. But in any case, neither Krishnamurti nor the Buddha ever claimed to be divine. They claimed to,
Right.
They didn't claim anything. They were totally humble, in the same way that Art Patterson is humble. He doesn't claim anything.
Well, even with Jesus's words, if you say, "I am the way, the truth, and the light," him referring to God. Well, what's interesting, when you say that, if you feel it in the first person, not egomaniacally, what you're doing is you're expressing your own inner divinity. So it's not to say, "Oh, cool, you are the way, the truth, the light." The divine is external to me. When you say, "I am the truth, the way, the truth, and the light," it's not a, oh, prideful, look at me, look. I mean, it's not that. That's childish. It's the childlike connection going, "I'm divine." And so in that example, one of, I think, my responsibilities is to be my voice in nature and to help others see their divinity.
Right.
And
there's a couple of old Buddhist sayings. One is, if you see the Buddha coming down the road, kill him.
because
Okay.
it's not you.
And because it's not the Buddha.
Real. Yeah.
It's
You
some ego that thinks, has these delusions of grandeur, just as the crazy guy in Jung's Vision today,
Right,
that we were reading, had delusions of grandeur of being Christ, or being supposed to marry the mother of God and all that business. If that's what you think, then you're on the wrong track, because you aren't.
Right.
And the other one is, there's a famous joke that we used to tell in Buddhist circles about, and by the way, I don't go to any Buddhist meetings anymore. I happen to be married to a very devoted Buddhist, okay? And she and I started in Buddhism together in about 1994. She became the equivalent, in my mind, of a lama, because she did a 3-year retreat, which is how you become a lama in Buddhism. But she didn't become ordained because she was already married to me. And she took one path, which was Buddhism, and she's still on it. And she meditates a couple of hours a day, and I took the Jung path. But we're extremely compatible, because Jungian psychology is fundamentally similar to Buddhism. And and so, you know, you can understand that in very many ways. Jung himself said it. And so, you know, I don't see, you know, I honor all of the world's religions because as Jung rightly said, all of the world's religions were evolutionary ways for human beings to deal with the issues that come up in the psyche. And they became more and more effective. And so the rituals of every religion help people psychologically deal with the things that we're talking about here today. And they work, but they all work. It's not just one works. And so, and that's the fundamental error of the human species over thousands of years here, which has been, you have to do it my way or the highway, and that's not true. You know, there's nothing wrong with dealing with the craziness of your psyche by going to, you know, religious observances and following a religion. There's absolutely nothing wrong with that whatsoever. And it doesn't matter which religion, because they've all developed in an evolutionary fashion to deal with the same issues. But you know, they are all right in that way, and to fight one another over who's right and who's wrong, that's just a war over the collection plate, basically. That's a war, you know, claiming I want you as my congregant, not their congregant, because then you're going to give money to me and let me continue my ministry. Here, you know, Jordan and I mostly don't take money. I mean, I occasionally get a tip on, right, you know, on the super chat here, but that in no way covers the costs of operating this, you know, and we don't have salaries, and it no way covers the costs of operating this YouTube channel. So,
well, it's interesting. I'd like to share something that an article I'm working on, but share just a line from it, since you're bringing up the Buddha here with this comment. And I wrote, "The Buddha signs no autographs, and instead, in silence, commands you by example to live your name."
Mm-hmm.
Or you are
right.
The word. So.
Right. And so anyway, I meant to tell this famous story that people would, there's a dais on which both Christ and Buddha are the guests of honor. And there's a Q&A period in which people raise their hands and says, well, what keeps you apart? What keeps you and Christ apart? Or what to Jesus, what keeps you and Buddha apart? And the answer that they say in unison is our fans.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
because it's the people who follow these traditions that think that it has to be my way or the highway, and it's not.
Right.
And it isn't the leaders. And, you know, obviously these are both men who came along at a similar time. There are many stories now that Jesus, in fact, didn't die on the cross, but was nursed back to health and went to India and lived a long life to age 80. And
Elvis and Michael Jackson are there with him, along with Bruce Lee.
Yeah, well, they all are there now, that's for sure. Yeah. whether or not, regardless of where the bones are.
Right.
So anyway, I wanted to read the footnotes here to the segment that Jordan read, and then we'll call it a day. So to the sentence where it says about, let's see, I guess it's be tentative with words, value them well, take safe words, words without catches, do not spin them with one another so that no webs arise, for you are the first who are ensnared in them. And the footnote reads, for words are not merely words, but have meanings for which they are set. They attract these meanings like demonic shadows. Okay, and that's an important idea, that, you know, every word is a symbol for perhaps thousands of other meanings that have been used in conjunction with those words over many years. And so you just don't know. And let's see, then there's a statement in the text, but men consider him mad. And there's a footnote. Once you have seen the chaos, look at your face. You saw more than death and the grave. You saw beyond, and your face bears the mark of one who has seen chaos and yet was a man. Many cross over, but they do not see the chaos. However, the chaos sees them, stares at them, and imprints its features on them, and they are marked forever. Call such a one mad, for that is what he is. He has become a wave and lost his human side, his constancy. Okay. And then there's another footnote here. But just as Christ knew that he was the way, the truth, and the life, in that the new torment and the renewed salvation came into the world through him, the footnote says the preceding sentence is crossed out in the corrected draft, and Jung has written in the margin, Philemon identification. So Jung at that point, when he wrote Philemon identification next to this phrase, he was realizing that this is a symbol of the self. And
I'd like, with that symbol of the self, Patrick made a really great comment in the chat that I'd like to respond to out here, because I think his comment really opens up some treasure for other people. When he said the line he's asking about, you know, what does this line mean? He who strives against waves is exposed to the arbitrary. And I would respond that he who strives against the waves is dancing with nature. So instead of this preordained, pre-planned, I know where I'm going, well, the waves are doing their thing. And when you go against the waves, you're dancing, doing your thing with the waves. So does it create an interference pattern in you, or does it create a resonance in you? Because I think the arbitrary is that, you know, nature doesn't have a plan, but it certainly lives what's going on. So I would suggest that arbitrary is somewhat of a loosely veiled code of nature. And so I appreciate, Patrick, that you put that in the chat, because he who strives against the waves, or they who strive against the waves, are exposed to the arbitrary. Well, good, you know, cool, because that's the point. And so I'm glad you picked that gold nugget out of that, you know, pan of that paragraph. So thank you.
No, thank you. Whenever I'm reading Jung and there's like a line or something that's obscure, doesn't make complete sense, I learned to pay special attention to it and try my best to figure it out, because usually sometimes it changes the entire perspective I have on the piece that I'm reading.
Yes.
You know, it's like what you guys were saying about the opposing, you refine each other's outlook.
Yeah, and it's very significant, Patrick, that it only matters what you think about it. It doesn't matter what I think about it. It doesn't matter what Jordan thinks about it. It matters what you think about it. and that's the key. We've all won a lottery, and that lottery is we all have a human life, and the chances of that happening even between our parents is in the millions to one. And so once we get into that life, then we need to learn to live it. And there are a lot of people who want you to live it a certain way, and you're right not to necessarily go with them. I do want to
even Jungians do that. They some Jungians psychologize their life away and don't live it,
Right.
Well, and that's right. And one of the reasons I've been doing this YouTube channel for now 7 years, we're in our 8th year here, is that the Jungian community, many of them never got it. And I know of Jungians who have been Jungians and taught and written books about Jung for 40 years who never read the Red Book. And if you don't read the Red Book, you're not going to get it. Okay, that's the essence of it. And that's a significant service. That's the very significant service that Sonu Shamdasani gave us by translating and insisting on getting it published over many years. I mean, it's a huge thing that he did.
Well, I appreciate, I think to put it, I'll put it in the Patrick too, the swimming against the waves, exposed to the arbitrary. I'll put it in my own personal perspective. What I always say is that don't go with the flow. Be fluid, but don't go with the flow. Only dead fish go with the flow, because fish swim against the current. So their water being, as it were, braces against the current. So, be fluid, but don't go with the flow, because only dead fish go with the flow. So that, I think, to me, encapsulates how I embrace that quote.
Yeah, now I do want to refer
as someone who has been going against the current for a very long time. One day it'll get you in trouble.
Oh yeah.
But the food, going against the current, the food comes right to you. And actually, I don't care about getting in trouble anymore. I am trouble. So
there you go.
It's like a cat. Don't be part of the solution. Be the whole problem. So.
I think the people from the January 6th riots are learning all about that. One man and his son were begging for mercy from the court, and I'm not really sure if Nancy Pelosi is going to be merciful.
Yeah, you can't mow the guy's lawn for a summer because you sent the ball to the window. This is a little different than mercy. This is responsibility.
Yeah. And it's for everyone to see. It's not only for them. And Jonty makes a different interesting comment. She said, and I think she's referring to somebody else. She says, I have to admit, since you have revealed your lack of Christian sympathy here, it's no longer a place I think is sacred anyway. Jung's name is often hijacked for clicks. Abraxas shrugs.
Abraxas shrugs.
Right.
Oh, funny.
And then Avant-Garde says, when you're going somewhere, any road will take you there. And
well, and Jung famously said, I'm so glad I'm Jung, so I don't have to be a Jungian.
Exactly. Okay, let me get back to some of these footnotes. So there's this long sentence which says, just as the disciples of Christ recognized that God had become flesh and lived among them as a man, we now recognize that the anointed of this time is a God who does not appear in the flesh. He is no man, and yet is the Son of Man, but in spirit and not in flesh. Hence, he can be born only through the spirit of men as the conceiving womb of God. Now, the footnote reads, Jung elaborated on this issue many years later in Answer to Job, 1952, when he studied the historical transformation of Judeo-Christian God images. A major theme in this is the continued incarnation of God after Christ. Commenting on the book of Revelation, Jung argued that ever since John the apocalyptist experienced for the first time, perhaps unconsciously, the conflict into which Christianity inevitably leads, mankind is burdened with this: God wanted and wants to become man. In Jung's view, there was a direct link between John's views and Eckhart's views. This disturbing invasion engendered in him the image of the divine consort, whose image lives in every man of the child, whom Meister Eckhart also saw in the vision. It was he who knew that God alone in his Godhead is not in a state of bliss, but must be born in the human soul. The incarnation in Christ is the prototype which is continually being transferred to the creature by the Holy Ghost. In contemporary times, Jung gave great importance to the papal bull of the Assumptio Mariae. He held that it points to the hieroskamos in the pleroma, that this is the sacred marriage in the pleroma, and this in turn implies, as we have said, the future birth of the divine child, who is in accordance with the divine trend toward incarnation, will choose as his birthplace the empirical man. This metaphysical process is known as the individuation process in the psychology of the unconscious. Through being identified with the continued incarnation of God in the soul, the process of individuation found its ultimate significance. On May 3rd, 1958, Jung wrote to Morton Kelsey, "The real history of the world seems to be the progressive incarnation of the deity." And then the next sentence: "What is done to this God you do to the lowest in yourself, under the law of love, according to which nothing is cast out, for how else should your lowest be saved from depravity?" And the footnote reads, and this is in the legend of the image, image number 111, "The serpent fell dead unto the earth, and that was the umbilical cord of a new birth. The serpent is similar to the serpent in image 109. In Black Book 7, on January 27th, 1922, Jung's soul refers to images 109 and 111. His soul says, "The giant cloud of eternal night is awful. I see a yellow shining stroke in this cloud from the top left-hand corner in the regular shape of a streak of lightning, and behind it in an indeterminate reddish light in the cloud. It does not move. It does not move. I see a dead black serpent lying beneath the cloud and the lightning. It does not move. Beneath the cloud, I see a cloud. I see a dead black serpent, and the thunderbolt stuck in its head like a spear. A hand as large as that of God has thrown the spear, and everything has frozen to a gloomy image. What is it trying to say? Do you recall that image that you painted years ago, the one in which the black and red man with the black and white serpent is struck by the ray of God, i.e. image 109. This image seems to follow that one, because afterward you also painted the dead serpent. And did you not behold a gloomy image this morning of that man in the white robe and a black face like a mummy. How now? What is that supposed to mean? Soul. It is the image of yourself. And footnote 202, none of the damnation is cast out either. And the footnote, but the draft continues, but who does this under the law of love will move beyond suffering, sit at the table with the anointed and behold God's glory. And then there are many graves and corpses in us, the evil stench of decomposition. And the footnote reads, but God will come to those who take their suffering upon themselves under the law of love, and he will establish a new bond with them. For it is predicted that the anointed is supposed to return, but no longer in the flesh, but in the spirit. And just as Christ guided the flesh upward through the torment of salvation, the anointed of this time will guide the spirit upward through the torment of salvation. And one more footnote, I think it's one more, two more, one more is the text reads, for our spirit has become an impertinent whore, a slave to words created by men and no longer the divine word itself. And the footnote reads, the lowest in you is the stone that the builders discarded. It will become the cornerstone. The lowest in you will grow like a grain of rice from dry soil, shooting up from the sand of the most barren desert, and rise and stand very tall. Salvation comes to you from the discarded. Your sun will rise from muddy swamps. Like all others, you are annoyed at the lowest in you because its guise is uglier than the image of yourself that you love. The lowest in you is the most despised and least valued, full of pain and sickness. He is despised so much that one hides one's face from him, that he is held in no respect whatsoever, that it is even said that he does not exist because one is ashamed for his sake and despises oneself. In truth, it carries our sickness and is ridden with our pain. We consider him the one who is plagued and punished by God on account of his despicable ugliness. But he is wounded and exposed to madness. For the sake of our own justice, he is crucified and suppressed for the sake of our beauty. We leave him to punishment and martyrdom, that we might have peace, but we will take his sickness upon ourselves, and salvation will come to us through our own wounds. The first lines refer to Psalm 118, verse 2. The passage echoes Isaiah 53, which Jung cited above, page 118. And the final footnote, sorry these are so long, but they are long. And so the despicable prisoner will ascend to his salvation shining and wholly healed. And that is the quote from the Red Book. The footnote reads, the draft continues, why should our spirit not take upon itself torment and restlessness for the sake of sanctification? But all this will come over you, for I already hear the steps of those who bear the keys to open the gates of the depths, the valleys and mountains that resound with the noise of battles, the lamentation arising from innumerable inhabited sites is the omen of what is to come. My visions are truth, for I have beheld what is to come. But you are not supposed to believe me, because otherwise you will stray from your path and the right one that leads you safely to your suffering that that I have seen ahead. May no faith mislead you. Accept your utmost unbelief. It guides you on your way. Accept your betrayal and infidelity, your arrogance and your better knowledge, and you will reach the safe and secured route that leads you to your lowest. And what you do to your lowest, you will do to the anointed. Do not forget this. Nothing in the law of love is abrogated, but much has been added to it. Cursed unto himself is he who kills the one capable of love in himself. For the horde of the dead who died for the sake of love is immeasurable, and the mightiest among these dead is Christ the Lord. Holding these dead in reverence is wisdom. Purgatory awaits those who murder the one in themselves who is capable of love. You will lament and rave against the impossibility of uniting the lowest in you with the law of those who love. I say to you, just as Christ subjugated the nature of the physical to the spirit under the law of the word of the Father, the nature of the spirit shall be subjugated to the physical under the law of Christ's completed work of salvation through love. You are afraid of the danger, but know that where God is nearest, the danger is greatest. How can you recognize the anointed one without any danger? Will one ever acquire a precious stone with a copper coin? The lowest in you is what endangers you. Fear and doubt guard the gates of your way. The lowest in you is the unforeseeable, for you cannot see it. Thus shape and behold it. You will thus open the floodgates of chaos. The sun rises from the darkest, dampest, and coldest. The unknowing people of this time only see the one. They never see the other approaching them. But if the one exists, so does the other. Jung had here implicitly cites the opening lines of Friedrich Holderlin's Patmos. It's a poem, which was one of his favorite poems, where Holderlin says, quote, "Near is the God and hard to grasp, but where danger is, salvation also grows." Jung discussed this in Transformation and Symbols of the Libido, collected work B, paragraph 651 and following. And that's Psychology of the Unconscious in the English version, which later became Transformations of the Libido, and I think it's collected works number 5. Let's see, I guess we're sort of at the end. Okay.
Is that it for the reading?
That's it. Okay, so go ahead.
Thanks,
everybody.
So, I mean, what that really jumped out at me when it says about, your unbelief will guide you, your arrogance, and will lead you to your lowest, and how you treat your lowest is how you will treat the anointed. And to me, that's that's your relationship to yourself. If you live by those qualities, you do find your lowest. And that's kind of like I said, the situation that I just recently find myself in. And it's interesting to me, I forget where I heard it, that, human beings are God's attempt, the creator appreciating his creation, right? So no other animal has the discernment that a human being does. So we are the only ones able to see in the different levels of resolution in the world the things that we do. And God is eternal and omniscient, omnipresent, omnipotent, so he doesn't feel pain. So through incarnating in a human being, he gets to feel limitation and pain and struggle and strife and all the things that we normally would not associate with the deity.
Yeah.
And
That's well said. And I think too, one thing in life I learned of, being comfortable with your own intensities honestly comes from rock bottom. But the thing is, then you stand up, you look around, it's beyond embracing the suck kind of thing. You stomp, stomp, stomp. Rock bottom is a really strong place to stand. And you stomp, stomp, stomp your way out from that lowest, which I think Jung is talking about here. You actually now have cleared out and know you. And instead of being able to describe you, you then live you, which to me induced quite a level of serene calmness, especially in the chaos. Where if there's not enough chaos, I kind of feel like I'm probably in the wrong place.
Yeah, I think it's important to remember Lawrence Jaffe's single sentence that summarizes all of Jungian psychology. And what he said in this sentence was the whole purpose of Jungian psychology is to open access to that healing power which resides in in our unconscious. And thank you, Jordan, for sharing that. So let me read it again. Hold it up, Jordan. The purpose of Jung's whole psychology is to make accessible to us that healing power which resides in our unconscious. Okay, so when I'm working with these young, tough kids who are constantly fighting, it's the one thing that I want to say to them above everything is you already know everything you need to live a life. And the question is, your teachers are helping you see those things which you already know. Right. And if you're not interested in that, you're going to live a tough life. But if you're interested in that, then let these wonderful people who really care about you and really want you to learn what you already have within you, let those people show you the way. That's what we're here for. That's what education is for. And education.
And I think adding to that too, rock bottom is a place where you can hear your own footsteps. And then all of a sudden you realize you yourself are your own foundation. Stomp, stomp, stomp. You're connected to the earth. You're not floating around. You're not being pushed around. In that place, it's usually solitude also. And it's not loneliness. It's, oh, I'm alive. Stomp, stomp. You literally feel, hear, see, experience yourself. Yeah. And I think what happens is you don't start over from scratch. You're starting over from experience. And what's the old quote? Wisdom comes from experience, but experience comes from poor decision making. So,
yeah, and at the end of this, I want to emphasize one thing that Jung says explicitly, which Jordan was reading. This is the last sentence of what Jordan read. Since Christ imposed bloody sacrifice on humanity, the renewed God will not spare bloodshed. Okay. And so the point of this is humanity we're all knuckleheads. We're slow to learn. And
we learn from pain.
And so we learn from blood, and that's why we learn from wars, because those sacrifices force us to learn what we didn't know before. And what, the experiences of being in war and seeing bloodshed, can help you learn, definitely. They definitely affected me in very many ways. And you know, I had a Marine die in my arms in Vietnam. You know, that's how that sacrifice of that young man, whose loss of his life I regret very much, is, you know, causes me to reflect on what I already know. Right.
Mhm. Yeah,
And-
that's a good point. That's a
And
really good, what you
yeah.
already know.
yeah,
The
Thank
wisdom
you,
of the ages
Kathy.
resides inside. You just have to discover it.
And so anyway,
I'm gonna need to boogie.
yeah, we all need boogie. So thank you everyone for being here today. It's
Thanks.
been
Nice talking to you guys.
a good
Yeah,
You
session.
too.
I have a question for you. Can I email you a question, Skip?
Oh, of course, of course. Yeah,
Well,
I
be on the lookout.
right now in the first week of school on Monday, which was the first day we had students, I had about 20 different people in my school who sent me emails saying, well, this is how we're working with these people this today. And so honestly, I haven't even gotten to read everything that was sent to me
Nice.
on the first day of school yet.
That's why I
Thanks,
have 5 emails.
But
Thank you.
I do look at my Gmail account, skip.conover@gmail.com. And if I haven't responded to you, and I worry that I may not have responded to a couple of people in the last week, please don't take it personally, and please send your inquiry again, because I think somebody wanted access to something that I just never got back to. But
Queen of Swords, no false sense of urgency. No news is good news. Just wait. Your life's not going to end if you don't get my response till next week. So it's like, but thanks for
Yeah.
being here, Amela, also.
all right, so we will continue again next week with page 355.
Cool.
And so we'll
Have a
see
good week, guys.
See you
You too.
then.
Thank you so
Take care
much.
now. Peace.
Thank you.
And definitely
Thank
do
you
write to
so
me.
much.
Thank
Thanks,
you,
Amela.
Amel, for being here. It's great that you're here.
I have a question for you when
Okay.
we're not live anymore.
Okay. Let's see how okay, well, wait a minute, we're still live on YouTube though. Just a minute. I'm not sure I can.
Awesome.
Okay, stop recording, but I think we're still on YouTube. So
Oh, that's weird.
okay, Mela, let me send you a link that you and I can talk. Can you give me 5 minutes, please?
Okay,
And-
sure.
And then I'll say, within this 5 minutes, I will send you a private link that you and I can talk.
Okay.
Okay,
Looking forward to it.
okay, bye-bye. And I do have, well, okay. All right, so ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much for being here. And if you have something for me, please write skip.conover@g. I'm trying to get my email into here. That's my email address, and don't and I want to remind you of the Confluence. Not Confluence 20.23, it's Confluence 23. Okay, so we hope to see you some there, and we'll be talking to you later. Bye-bye.